had some hot weather this week. Oof, oof. Most of you know this already about me. I love drinking coffee. But probably most of you don't know, I'm usually not that much of a fan of iced coffee. It's just not my thing. Unless, of course, it's the peak of summer and it's really hot outside. This week, I found myself in a coffee bean, ordering an ice-blended coffee. You probably know they have all sorts of different variations of this delightful and icy beverage. And you might remember, all the coffee bean locations locally used to be certified kosher. This isn't the case anymore, but when I came to Los Angeles in 2011, Coffee Bean was a reliable spot for finding kosher food and finding other Jews who wanted to eat kosher food. This week, when I walked into the Coffee Bean to order my ice-blended coffee, I happened to see a gentleman who reminded me of these Jewish connections you'd always used to have at the Coffee Bean. He was wearing a baseball hat, collared shirt, black pants, black shoes. If you looked really closely, you could see he was wearing a talit katan, a special shirt with tzitzit on it. And I happened to be wearing a logo t-shirt with art from the album cover of Batya Levin's album Karov. You probably know this about me by now. Another thing I love about the summer is wearing t-shirts with Jewish logos on them. My Adat Shalom Shabbaton t-shirts, my Adat Shalom Chaverim softball team t-shirt. Hey. And of course, my Batya Levin t-shirt, which features some cool art and the Hebrew letters of the word karov, the word close, prominently featured in the middle of the design. So this gentleman and I, we identified each other right away as fellow members of the tribe. And a moment or two of conversation later, we identified each other as fellow leaders in the local Jewish community. He's one of the cantors at Beth Jacob, and of course, I'm the rabbi here. So we're in the type of conversation that doesn't usually happen. And of course, we connected about the number one topic on the mind and heart of every Jewish leader at this time of year, the high holidays. He shared with me that he had been involved in leading services and receiving an honorarium for his time and effort since he became bar mitzvah. Now, I didn't tell him my entire life story at this point. I don't usually reveal the details of my unusual Jewish journey upon meeting someone for the first time, but I really connected with him on this. I first experienced the full complement of high holiday services in 2008. I went to the mikveh and became Jewish in spring 2009 and experienced high holiday services for the second time in that fall 2009. By the next year, 2010, I was leading Shacharit on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and the rest is history. It's always profound for me to meet another Jew whose experience of the high holidays has pretty much always been connected to leading these services in some capacity, who, like me, knows what it's like to lead, but doesn't have that much experience just participating. So this is a cool conversation, a cool connection. And then he observed and remarked, everything happens for a reason. Upon hearing this, I was like, I deflated a little bit. Everything happens for a reason? Does it really? I just don't know about that one. So we chatted for a while longer, wished each other a Shabbat Shalom, and went our separate ways. And of course, the conversation made an impact on me. But is it really true that this conversation, quote, happened for a reason, unquote? And what does that phrase even mean? I think I really started to take issue with this phrase, this saying, this concept, somewhere in the middle of my rabbinic education. I had an internship at Beit Teshuvah, a Jewish addiction rehab, and there I was meeting a wide variety of people, Jews and non-Jews, all involved in some capacity in 12-step recovery. Now, 12-step recovery isn't affiliated with any specific religion. It's open to all religions, which means some people who practice 12-step recovery are religious Christians, and some people who practice 12-step recovery are secular Christians, which is to say they're culturally Christian. And I found myself hearing this phrase, everything happens for a reason, over and over again in these settings. And I started understanding that for some people, including my new Christian friends that I met through 12-step recovery and my new friend I happened to meet at Coffee Bean, I think it also applies to him as well, this phrase expresses a profound trust in God. Everything happens for a reason means God is taking care of me and God is taking care of you too. Well, here's the thing. Right around the time I had the internship in the addiction rehab, I was also at the point of my rabbinic education where I was taking classes in pastoral care and chaplaincy. I was learning that it would be part of my job to bring comfort to families and individuals experiencing profound tragedy. If a rabbi, God forbid, has to care for a family who has lost a young child to a terrible illness, let's just say our teachers told us there are things that are not right to say. In the face of tragedy, especially in the face of another person's tragedy, it is a whole lot more appropriate to question God, even to rail against God, than it is to suggest that on some level everything's okay. Because in moments of tragedy, nothing is okay. This week I was studying the parasha with my students, and one student said, I've got this verse I've always had a problem with. It's a verse we find right at the beginning of our parasha. And it goes like this: You shall be blessed above all other peoples. There shall be no sterile male or female among you or your livestock. My student said, we know this is not true. We all know people and families within the Jewish community who want to have children and can't have children. So why is this verse here when we know it's not true? And so I responded and I said, so basically your question is, why do bad things happen to good people? Indeed, this is really the question that's always on the table. In the face of October 7th, in the face of the Holocaust, in the face of all the terrible things that have happened to us and to our families. I remember exploring this question in detail in the first year of my rabbinic education. My teacher at the time was Rabbi Mordecai Finley. He called this question the 3 O's and the B. If God is the 3 O's, omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent, that is always present, always knowing, all powerful, and God is B, benevolent, that is always good, how is there evil in the world? So you have to solve the problem, he taught, by taking out one of those in your description of God. God can't be all 3 O's and the B, because we know bad things happen in the world. So I thought about this for a while. At the time I was learning this, I hadn't yet reached my 30th birthday, but I had experienced some real challenges in my life. I hadn't had an easy time. And I decided to solve the problem, God wasn't benevolent. Because if God was always good, I wouldn't have experienced so much pain. I continued on in this view for a few years as I continued my rabbinic learning, and eventually I started studying with Rabbi Brad Artson. He took a very different perspective on this question, and he shares quite openly about it. His perspective was transformed when his twin children were born, a son and a daughter. This new life brought profound joy, yet pretty soon it became clear his son was very different. Those of us who know Rabbi Artson certainly know his son has autism. At the time this was becoming clear, Rabbi Artson started having a whole different type of conversation with God. Eventually he came to understand that God could not have prevented his son's autism, that God didn't have that type of power. But God would always be present with him and with his son. For Rabbi Artson, God was indeed always good. But God wasn't exactly always powerful. Now, learning this from him made a profound impact on me. I had to stop and ask myself, what does it say about me if I carry this belief that God isn't good? How is that really working for me in my life? What does that say about my ability to take the pain I've experienced and try to turn it into wisdom? And I changed my mind about the 3 O's and the B. I decided that God is good, that God does love us and care about us, that God does love and care about me. But I couldn't quite square the circle when it came to God's omnipotence. The idea of God not really being all-powerful still didn't make sense to me. And I carried this feeling for a while until I learned a teaching from the Talmud, shared with me by my classmate Rabbi Rachel Martyr. This teaching is Olam Kaminhago Noheg. The world works according to its way. In other words, it's not the case that everything happens for a reason. Sometimes things just happen. For me, this teaching made room for God's omnipotence. God made this world and all it contains, and as we affirm every day in our prayers, God is continually renewing God's creation. And this world, made by God, contains some really good things. In the words of Rabbi Elliot Dorff, one of God's greatest gifts in the human experience is mint chocolate chip ice cream. God's world has hugs, high fives, and laughter. And God's world also has things that aren't good. Heartbreak, disappointment, infertility, tragic illness, the Holocaust. Olam kamin hago noheg. God made a world that works according to its way, a world that contains both goodness and evil. Now, why exactly did God do this? Why would God create a world of good and evil and place us right in the middle of this mess? I'm not sure there's only one answer to that question, but I am pretty sure that being in the middle of the mess is kind of the whole point. The human experience that God gives us is the task of sorting through it all. To this, some of us might respond with sarcasm, some gift, thanks a lot. In fact, the Talmud teaches that the schools of Shammai and Hillel disagreed for 2.5 years as they debated the question, would it have been better for God to never create humankind and the human experience? Or is it better that God did create humankind and the human experience? After these 2.5 years of arguing, they took a vote. The majority decided it would have been better for God to never have created humankind, to have never created this immersion into mess that we call the human experience. Whoops, here we are. The Talmud continues and concludes, well, now that we have been created, the best thing for us to do is to be thoughtful about our actions, about what we're doing and what we have done. In other words, now that we're here, we should make the best of it. My challenge for us in the coming week is to do at least one thing that shows we're making the best of it. It can be something small like sharing a smile with someone you've never met before, holding the door open for the person behind you. It can be something special like celebrating a birthday or an anniversary. Or it can be something profound, like reflecting on disappointment and tragedy and finding a new way to let in more of life's goodness. As it says in Psalms, Zeh hayom asa Adonai nagila v'nismecha vo. Today is the day that God has made. Let's rejoice in it and be happy. Shabbat shalom.